Everyone, my name is Jacob. Thank you for joining me. This is Hunt Detail, and there are really two camps of hunters when it comes to hunting based on the moon. There is the red moon group, which we talked about in the previous video, part one, and you can find that video here. And then the other camp is moon phase, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Full moon, crescent moon, new moon, all of that. Just to reiterate though, with the red moon is not moon phase. Red moon is when the moon is closest to the earth, when you'll hear the term overhead or underfoot. And as the moon has an elliptical orbit around the earth, and when it's overhead or underfoot, and that coincides with the sunrise or sunset, then that's sort of coined red moon. It's not a lunar eclipse, it's not a blood moon, it's not that phenomenon. And again, it's not moon phase. So I would encourage you to check out that other video if you want to look at the best dates for the red moon. I will tell you, when I look back at the past 4 deer that have been killed by myself or my son, those dates were actually red moon dates, or overhead or underfoot dates. And now it wasn't like we killed those bucks on it within a minute of the red moon being overhead or underfoot. It wasn't like that. It just happened to be a day where the moon was overhead or underfoot during daylight hours. So take it for what it's worth. It's fun. I would encourage you to go to salunarforecast.com if you want to look at that for yourself. And you can punch in a zip code and you can see the dates and when it is overhead and underfoot, and sort of look at the sunrise and sunset for October, November, December, September, whatever. Again, I identify some of those on the previous video. Now, there is data coming out of Auburn. This came out in 2016, and they looked at 38 male deer between August and December of 2010 to 2012. And they had GPS collars, and they were looking at moonrise and moonset, which is a different measure, but they were also looking at overhead and underfoot. And they sort of poo-pooed overhead and underfoot. And, I would encourage you to take a look at this data. I'll provide a link if you go into the Hunt Detail Instagram page, Hunt Detail. In the profile, you'll see a link tree, and you can find some of these studies there. Now, as we pivot into the moon phase discussion, Mark Drury is, for example, a big fan of moon phase, particularly full moon, and we're going to get into that. I will tell you that there are a couple studies that poo-poo moon phase in correlation to deer movement. There was a study from Penn State a couple years ago that came out, and they had GPS monitored deer, but I think they were all does, according to what I'm reading here. There's a study by Jessica Hepner. And so, it didn't really, I don't think, and honestly, I don't even think it was during the fall time frame. I could be wrong, but just the fact that it was all does, wasn't that compelling to me. I'm not looking at doe movement per se. I'm really wanting to understand buck movement. And that takes me to another study. This was published a number of years ago, I think maybe in 2010. And this included Dr. Bronson Strickland, who is very, outspoken about how he believes there's no correlation between deer movement and moon phase. And he tends to focus on moon phase in his studies. This was a study that included property in Oklahoma, and these were, again, GPS collared deer. And, the problem with this study is that there's just so many holes in it. Like, it's not that compelling to me, because they had 15 male deer, but of those 15, only 6 of them were studied during the fall time frame, which was November 18th through December 23rd. Well, you've missed most of the fall there, and you only had 6 deer, and of those 6 deer, 5 of them were mature, but one of them, was less than 2 years old. And so this isn't that compelling to me. Now, I think he has another study coming out of roughly 50 deer, and I think he started to share some of the data from that study. But again, I haven't seen it published. I don't know the nuance of it, and I think ultimately, when you look at what we want as bow hunters, as it relates to whitetail deer, we want just an extra 20 yards. We just want an extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes of daylight movement. And so I think even the best study is going to have a difficult time, especially if you believe in moon phase or you believe in the red moon and you have seen things happen in the field yourself, and you've seen magic days that sort of pop out of nowhere. And so ultimately, there's a lot of data out there that poo-poos this. It doesn't really bother me. I don't have a dog in the fight, quite honestly. I don't really care. And it doesn't matter to me if you choose to use this information or not, because I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just sharing it with you because I think it's interesting to look at, especially as we come into this fall season of 2024. So, it's funny, we see moon phase used in our magazines and as it relates to the rut. And so let's talk about how Mark Drury sort of approaches this in terms of moon phase. And the things that you'll read, they'll say a lot of, there's, like a new moon, there's less movement than on a quarter moon and a waxing or a waning. And we're not going to get into some of that minutia because it seems like it's like stand on your right foot and touch your nose and, chew gum and, rub your head and all of that stuff. So the way that Mark has boiled it down is that he really likes the full moon. And he really likes it when the full moon lands closer to the middle of the month, especially when the middle of November. And he believes that there is more chasing when the full moon, leading up to the full moon and after the full moon. And so he has stated that if the full moon lands sort of like at the end of October and at the end of November, that rut for that year is sort of a trickle rut. It's not this sort of explosion of chasing where we have some of those magical days. Now the rut happens every year at the same time, and it's not based on the moon. It's based on apparently on the photo, the amount of light that enters a doe's eye, and as it gets less and less, it triggers increased production of melatonin and these other domino effect of hormones that cause her to go into estrus, sort of those middle weeks of November. But the moon is not a part of that dynamic. But as Mark described it, he really likes it, again, when the full moon is landing in those middle parts of November, because he feels like it's a more magical rut. So there is a study out of NC State by Marcus Lashley that did sort of suggest that there is more daytime movement with a full moon because deer didn't necessarily move more at night with a full moon. So I think the suggestion is that just because we can see better at night on a full moon doesn't mean that the deer like it or that it helps them in their vision. And so they may be rutting less at night during a full moon and maybe more so in the day when on those full moon days, if that makes sense. And so that's out of NC State, and this was published, I believe, in 2014. And again, you can find that on a link on the Instagram page for Hunt Detail. But let's take a look at the dates for this year. And so if you go to moongiant.com, you'll be able to find this. And if we look at, and again, the way Mark looks at it is he likes the 5 to 7 days leading up to a full moon. He likes the afternoons. And then the 5 to 7 days after a full moon, he likes the mornings. And so as we look at September, we have a full moon on September 18th. So we really got the 11th through the 18th, or the 12th through the 18th, those afternoons as really good dates. And then after the 18th, we're looking at the mornings of September 19th through, say, the 24th. And so as we move, the good news is that as we get to October, we have a full moon on the 16th, the 17th. And then as we get to November, we have a full moon on November 15th, which is really ideal, again, based on the way that Mark has outlined it. As there's, the afternoons of I would say the 9th through the 15th, and then the mornings of the 15th through the 22nd are potentially really good days to circle on your calendar. Now, again, there are days there where I'm going to hunt all day. Those are going to be all day sits for me. I'm not going to base it like, I'm only going to hunt the afternoon, or I'm only going to hunt the morning. But for me, as I look at those dates, you may want to circle those on your calendar. Now, some of that does overlap or coincide with some of those red moon dates that I shared in the previous video. And so you may, go back to that video. You can circle those dates, write those dates down, or go to solunarforecast.com to get your specific dates. But that's the way Mark Drury has approached hunting moon phase. I think he does feel like there's less movement on sort of those dates of where there's a new moon. But really, for your purposes and for my purposes, I think really focusing on that full moon and sort of those days leading up and the days after, those might be good days to really circle on your calendar for this upcoming fall. So anyways, hope that you have found this helpful, and hopefully understand those concepts a little bit more, even if you don't integrate them into your own hunting plans, just to understand what it means by hunting a moon phase or a red moon, that sort of thing. Please like, share, and subscribe. Best of luck this upcoming season. Thank you again.